Okay, stop for a second and think about all the things you expect in a Metroid game. Morph Ball, Ice Beam, energy tanks, side hoppers, Ridley, and, of course, Metroids. Other M has all of that stuff, but otherwise it's not quite like any Metroid game you've played before. Nintendo gave development of this game over to Team Ninja, you know, the Ninja Gaiden guys, and their influence really shows in Other M's combat-heavy third-person action. The unusual controls take a little getting used to here, but once it gets going, Other M turns out to be a satisfying action game and a great Metroid game to boot. Nintendo plays this one straight to the fan base, with Other M picking up right after Samus has seemingly destroyed the Metroids, the Space Pirates, and the entire planet Zebes, as they say in the game.
Planet Zebes? The planet Zebes?
At the end of Super Metroid. Samus answers a distress call in this game from a derelict research vessel called the Bottle Ship, and she quickly runs into some old military cohorts who happen to also be on board conducting some secret business for the Galactic Federation. You've probably guessed by now that things are seriously amiss on the Bottle Ship, and the situation starts to go bad almost immediately. Needless to say, the bad things that are going on are related to events in Samus's past, and the game introduces some pretty interesting twists to the franchise's mythology as the story wears on.
Any objections, lady?
Now, Metroid games have always been about solitary exploration of remote alien worlds, and honestly, you never really had much reason to even care who was actually inside that suit. But for the first time here, Other M actually tries to build a storyline around your mission with cutscenes and flashbacks to the past. This stuff initially comes off a little hokey, mostly thanks to some pretty dull voiceover for Samus and a roster of cookie-cutter squad mates.
Alright!
But the game gets past that after a few hours, and you get some actual dramatic payoff later on, as the plot focuses less on the immediate characters and more on the overall menace that Samus is facing on the Bottle Ship. There's some pretty great stuff in here for Metroid fans, but of course that's the stuff we don't want to show you because you should just play it for yourself. The ship is basically a giant floating holodeck, which gives the level designers all the excuse they need to show you a lava level, an ice level, some densely jungled areas, a desert, and plenty of metal industrial corridors. The flow of the game is classic Metroid. You can only access some of these areas from the get-go until you start to pick up some of Samus's trademark abilities like the grapple beam and the speed booster. Those, of course, let you both access new parts of the ship and also go back and find more optional upgrades, like energy tanks and extra missiles in the old areas. What's different about Other M is the action. It's built around this unusual sort of hybrid 2D, 3D movement scheme that you control only with the D-pad and two buttons using the Wii Remote on its side like it was an NES controller. In the tighter, corridor-like areas, you're practically side-scrolling as Samus runs along these invisible paths that are laid on the floor to follow along curved hallways and that sort of thing without actually making you zigzag with the D-pad to run along. Samus also has an auto-aim that lets you easily shoot any enemy that's more or less right in front of you, which generally works pretty well. It's not all left and right movement though. Of course, you'll also move into plenty of fully 3D areas and rooms, and the controls generally work pretty well in here too. Samus has a lot of combat abilities, like an automatic dodge maneuver and the ability to jump on top of bigger enemies for a quick kill shot. This is where that Team Ninja influence comes in, as these moves really make the action sequences feel pretty close to the Ninja Gaidens and the Bayonettas of the world. You also have a first-person aiming mode that makes you point the controller at the screen and lets you fire missiles, but the drawback is you can't move while you're using it. So you've got to be careful about when and where you decide to deploy the first person to hit enemies with missiles, and make sure they aren't going to close the distance on you before you can get a shot off. All these abilities generally work well together, but the controls do take some getting used to. While you're still learning the ropes, you might find yourself auto-aiming at the wrong enemy or going to first person while pointed in the wrong direction once in a while. But I personally didn't have a whole lot of issues like that after about 2 or 3 hours in.
Alright.
Like the other Metroid games, that's when Other M is really at its best anyway. The deeper into the imposing labyrinth you get, the more powerful the weapons you acquire, the more obscure the places you can access, the more fun the game gets. Other M doesn't fully deliver on all of its ambitions, but it gets close. I'm glad Nintendo tried something new with this latest Metroid, and the result is a fine and satisfying addition to the series.